was supposed to be a night of celebration. January 12, 2022, Derricka Patrick, a 29-year-old hairstylist from Chicago, had plans to attend her cousin's birthday party. She had spent the day working doing what she loved, styling hair for her loyal clients. But before she could make it to the celebration, her life was taken in a hail of bullets. She was inside her SUV car, parked near her home in 7400 South Vincennes, Grand Crossing neighborhood, when gunfire erupted. The sound echoed through the streets, rapid, deliberate. Neighbors heard the shots, some rushing to their windows, others ducking for cover. Moments later, the street fell silent again, but inside that car, Derricka Patrick was fighting for her life. When first responders arrived, they found her unresponsive, shot multiple times. Paramedics tried to save her, but the injuries were too severe. At just 29 years old, Derricka's life was over. The shooters had already disappeared into the night. No suspects were immediately identified, no arrests were made. The motive? Unknown. But for her grieving family, one thing was certain: someone out there knew exactly what happened, and they were staying silent. Was this a targeted attack? A case of mistaken identity? Or was there something else at play? This is the story of Derricka Patrick, a young woman with ambition and talent, whose life was taken before she had the chance to live out her dreams. To understand the weight of this tragedy, we have to know who Derricka Patrick was. She was more than just a hairstylist. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a cousin, and a businesswoman with ambition. Derricka's life was built around hard work, family, and the relationships she nurtured with those around her. Derricka was born and raised in Chicago, a city known for its deep history, culture, and janjas. She grew up in a family that supported her every step of the way. From a young age, she showed an interest in beauty and fashion. She was creative, always paying attention to detail, and she loved making people feel good about themselves. Her passion eventually turned into a career, and she dedicated herself to becoming one of the best hairstylists in her community. She didn't just style hair, she built confidence. She made sure every client who sat in her chair walked away feeling their best. People came to her for more than just a service, they came for an experience. She had a personal connection with her clients, remembering their stories, their preferences, and making them feel valued. It wasn't just about business, it was about relationships. And because of that, she had a loyal clientele who trusted her skills and her professionalism. What do you think makes a great hairstylist? Is it their skill, their personality, or something else? Let us know in the comments. Her social media reflected her dedication to her craft. She shared pictures of her work, sleek styles, intricate braids, and bold transformations. Her clients often posted about her, praising her talent and the kindness she showed. She was known for being reliable, passionate, and driven. She had dreams of expanding her brand, maybe opening her own salon one day. She was on her way to something bigger. But outside of work, Derricka was deeply connected to her family and friends. She was the type of person who never missed an important moment. Birthdays, holidays, celebrations, she was always there, making time despite her busy schedule. She was close with her mother and siblings, always making sure they were taken care of. She had a strong support system, and in return, she was a source of strength for the people in her life. Have you ever had someone in your life who always made time for others, no matter how busy they were? Share your experiences in the comments. Her cousin described her as someone you could always count on, whether it was for advice, a laugh, or just to have someone by your side. She was caring, thoughtful, and always looking out for others. That's why, when she was taken away, the pain ran deep. It wasn't just the loss of a young woman, it was the loss of a person who brought so much positivity to those around her. For those closest to Derricka, the hardest part was the fact that she was simply living her life, doing what she loved, and supporting the people she cared about. She wasn't involved in anything dangerous. She wasn't someone who had enemies. Her focus was on her future. And yet, in one night, that future was taken from her. Do you think tragedies like this happen too often to innocent people? Should there be more efforts to prevent violence in our communities? After her passing, tributes poured in from friends, family, and clients. They shared memories, photos, and messages about how much she meant to them. Many couldn't believe she was gone. It felt unreal, a life full of potential cut short in an instant. Her name was spoken with love, but also with sorrow. Because for everyone who knew her, there was one question they couldn't stop asking: why? Her family refused to let her name fade into the background. They continued to speak out, to push for answers, to remind the world that Derricka Patrick was more than just a victim of violence. She was a woman with a future, with goals, with dreams that should have been realized. Her story was far from over. But on January 12th, 2022, someone decided to end it. What do you think needs to change so families like Derricka's don't have to suffer in silence waiting for justice? The people who loved her are still waiting for justice, and until that day comes, they will continue to tell her story. Because Derricka Patrick was more than what happened to her. She was a force in her own right, a person who left an impact on everyone she met. And for that, she will never be forgotten. If you believe Derricka's story deserves more attention, take a moment and hit the like button, subscribe and share this video. Justice can only come when people refuse to stay silent. Let's keep her memory alive. January 12th, 2022. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. Derricka Patrick was on her way to her cousin Devonta Anderson's birthday party. It had been a long day, but she was excited to spend time with family. She had a 9-year-old daughter, and inside of her, a new life was growing. She was 4 months pregnant with her second child. The future looked bright. But before she could head to the celebration, she made a stop. Her car pulled into the parking lot in front of her home on South Vincennes Avenue. She wasn't alone, her niece was with her. And they had one last thing to grab before heading to the party: the birthday cake. Her niece stepped out of the SUV car and walked toward the house. It was a quick stop, just a few minutes inside to pick up the cake before they'd be on their way. Derricka stayed behind, sitting in the driver's seat, possibly scrolling through her phone, waiting. But as her niece disappeared inside, something happened. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. And at that moment, they made their move. Gunfire erupted. The first shot rang out, then another, then several more in rapid succession. The sound echoed through the block. The attack was over in seconds. Inside the house, her niece likely had no idea what was happening outside. Neighbors, startled by the sudden burst of gunfire, rushed to their windows. Some ducked for cover, afraid that the violence had reached their doorstep once again. Others hesitated, not wanting to see what they feared was outside. By the time anyone reacted, the street had gone silent again. The shooter or shooters had disappeared, and inside the SUV, Derricka Patrick sat motionless. Her niece ran back outside, only to find a scene that no one should ever have to witness. Derricka had been shot multiple times. The windows of her SUV were shattered, her body slumped behind the wheel. Her hands still gripping the steering wheel, her seatbelt still fastened. The birthday cake, the party, her family, everything she had planned for that night, was now nothing but an afterthought in the chaos of the moment. 911 was called. First responders arrived quickly, their flashing lights illuminating the street where just moments before, life had carried on as usual. Paramedics worked urgently, but the injuries were devastating. The bullets had done too much damage. She was transported to the University of Chicago Medical Center, but doctors could do nothing. At just 29 years old, Derricka Patrick and the unborn child she had been carrying for 4 months were pronounced dead. Her family, who had been expecting her to walk through the door to party, instead received the worst news imaginable. The celebration turned into mourning in an instant. A mother, a daughter, a friend, and an unborn child gone in an act of violence that still has no explanation. Her 9-year-old daughter was now left without a mother. A family that had been preparing for a new baby was instead forced to prepare for a funeral. And the worst part, the person responsible was nowhere to be found. The person or people responsible had slipped away into the night, leaving behind a family in agony and a community in shock. What do you think happened? Was Derricka targeted by someone she knew? Or could this have been something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Chicago police arrived at the scene within minutes. The flashing red and blue lights of squad cars reflected off the pavement as officers secured the area. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the parking lot, blocking off the spot where Derricka Patrick's black SUV remained, its shattered windows and bullet-riddled frame telling the story of what had just taken place. The paramedics had already rushed her to the hospital, but for investigators, the work was just beginning. Homicide detectives moved quickly, assessing the scene. They searched for shell casings, bullet trajectories, and any evidence that could point them toward a suspect. But there was one major problem: there were no immediate leads. No one had seen the shooter. No one had reported seeing a car speed away or anyone fleeing on foot. The entire attack had unfolded in seconds, and the assailant had disappeared just as quickly as they had arrived. One of the first questions detectives had to answer was whether this was robbery gone wrong. But almost immediately, that theory fell apart. Nothing had been stolen. Derricka's purse was still inside the vehicle. Her phone was untouched. The SUV had not been taken. There was no sign of forced entry or struggle. It was clear whoever pulled the trigger had only one intention: to kill. Officers began canvassing the area, knocking on doors, asking neighbors if they had seen or heard anything unusual before the shooting. Most said the same thing: they heard the gunfire, but they hadn't seen where it came from. The shots rang out, and then silence. No shouting, no arguments, no commotion before the attack. Whoever did this had been waiting for the perfect moment, striking without warning and vanishing without a trace. Detectives turned to surveillance footage, hoping that security cameras from nearby buildings or streetlights had captured anything that could help identify a suspect. But there was another setback. The available footage was too grainy, too distant, or simply didn't cover the exact spot where the shooting had occurred. The angle wasn't right. The lighting was poor. And just like that, a crucial source of evidence slipped away. With no immediate suspects and no clear video evidence, investigators had to shift their focus to motive. Detectives began tracing her last known movements, speaking with friends, family, and clients. The goal was to determine if Derricka had received any threats, if she had expressed concern about anything in the days leading up to her murder. But nothing obvious stood out. There were no reports of her being followed, no strange encounters, no disputes that anyone knew of. It was as if she had been targeted for reasons unknown. But there was no evidence to suggest Derricka had been mistaken for anyone else. Her car was distinct. Her stop at home was unplanned, just a quick stop to pick up a cake before heading to her cousin's birthday party. It didn't seem like a coincidence. It seemed personal. Ballistics experts examined the shell casings recovered from the scene, hoping to determine the type of weapon used and whether it had been linked to any other crimes in the city. But without a suspect, there was little else they could do. A forensic examination of Derricka's vehicle showed no clear fingerprints or DNA left behind by an attacker. If this had been a planned execution, the killer had taken steps to leave no trace. Days passed, then weeks. The news of Derricka's murder spread, but leads remained scarce. Her family, desperate for answers, pleaded with the public for information. Someone had to know something. Someone had seen or heard something that night. "We need the community's help," a police spokesperson said. "If anyone has any information, no matter how small, we urge them to come forward." But the streets had gone quiet again. The same way they did after the gunfire stopped that night. The same way they always do when justice is delayed. And for Derricka Patrick's family, silence was the last thing they could afford. Do you think investigators had enough evidence to work with? Or did someone out there see something and choose to stay quiet? As time passed, speculation grew. What really happened that night? Who would want Derricka dead? Investigators and the public began considering different possibilities. And while no definitive answers have surfaced, there are multiple theories that could explain why Derricka Patrick was targeted. Theory 1: mistaken identity. Could Derricka Patrick have been killed in a case of mistaken identity? Chicago has seen many tragic cases where innocent people were gunned down simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes shootings stem from personal vendettas, where an attacker believes they're targeting someone specific only to later realize they had the wrong person. Other times, gangs or organized criminals mistake an individual for a rival, leading to deadly consequences. Derricka was parked in her usual spot outside her home, waiting for her niece, completely unaware of any possible threat. She wasn't engaged in any disputes or criminal activity, and no known threats had been made against her. But could the shooter have believed she was someone else? If the attacker was looking for a different person driving a similar vehicle or living in the same area, it's possible they acted without confirming their target. This wouldn't be the first time an innocent life was taken because of a fatal misjudgment. But there's one major issue with this theory. Whoever shot Derricka fired multiple times, ensuring she wouldn't survive. This wasn't a random bullet hitting the wrong person in a drive-by. This was an execution-style killing. What do you think? Could Derricka have been mistaken for someone else? Or does the nature of the attack suggest this was intentional? Let us know in the comments. Theory 2. A targeted attack. If it wasn't a mistake, then that leaves a disturbing question: who would want Derricka Patrick dead? Some believe this was personal. A person doesn't get shot multiple times inside their own car, in front of their home, without reason. Nothing was stolen. Her sub was left untouched. The attack happened when she was alone for just a few minutes, suggesting that someone knew exactly where she would be. This points to the possibility that she was targeted by someone she knew. But here's where the theory gets complicated. Derricka wasn't known to have enemies. Her life revolved around her work, her daughter, and her growing family. She was 4 months pregnant. She had never expressed fear or concern that someone was after her. If this was a personal dispute, there were no known warning signs leading up to the shooting. Did Derricka have a falling out with someone that no one knew about? Could there have been a jealous acquaintance and a disgruntled former client, or someone from her past harboring resentment? If so, investigators haven't found clear evidence pointing to any one suspect. Another possibility under this theory is that someone close to Derricka knew more than they were saying. Often in cases like these, people hesitate to come forward out of fear or loyalty to someone involved. But as of now, there's no direct evidence linking a known individual to the crime. Do you believe someone from Derricka's past could have had a reason to harm her? If so, who do you think that person could be? Theory 3. A professional hit. The way Derricka was killed raises another disturbing question. Was this a professional hit? The shooter did not hesitate. They did not demand money or valuables. They did not attempt to enter the home. They fired multiple rounds, ensuring she wouldn't survive, and disappeared into the night without a trace. There were no security cameras capturing the getaway car. No one saw anyone fleeing the scene. Whoever did this knew how to strike fast and leave without drawing attention. If this was a contract killing, the bigger question is who ordered it, and why? Contract killings usually happen for a reason: money, retaliation, or silencing someone who knows too much. But none of these motives seem to apply to Derricka. She wasn't involved in anything illegal. She had no public conflicts. She was a mother, a hairstylist, a woman focused on her future. Some believe that if this was a hired hit, the person behind it could have had a personal grudge or knew something that hasn't been revealed to the public. But so far, no evidence has surfaced that connects her to anyone who would go to such extremes to end her life. Could this have been a professional hit? Or does it seem too personal? Let us know your thoughts below. Theory 4. Retaliation for something unseen. Another theory is that Derricka's murder was tied to something bigger, something happening behind the scenes that hadn't directly involved her, but may have affected someone close to her. In Chicago, gun violence is often connected to personal disputes, territorial conflicts, or past altercations that spiral into deadly consequences. Could Derricka have been caught in the crossfire of a situation she wasn't even aware of? This wouldn't be the first time an innocent person was killed because of something involving someone they knew. Sometimes, when a person has an issue with one individual, they go after someone close to them instead. A message, a warning, a punishment. Could someone in Derricka's life have been the intended target, but the attackers chose to harm her instead? So far, no public information suggests that she had any connection to such a conflict. But the silence surrounding the case raises questions. Was there something going on in her life that investigators never uncovered? Do you think this could have been a retaliation killing meant for someone else? Or does it seem too focused on Derricka specifically? Let us know what you think. The mystery remains. Derricka Patrick's murder remains unsolved. No suspects have been named. No arrests have been made. Her family continues to seek justice, hoping that someone, somewhere, will come forward with information that can finally bring them answers. Was she mistaken for someone else? Was this a personal vendetta? A professional hit? Or was she caught up in something she had no part in? The truth remains hidden, but the questions persist. What do you think happened to Derricka Patrick? Could this case have been solved with more evidence? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to help keep Derricka's story alive, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so more cases like this get the attention they deserve. Derricka Patrick's murder sent shockwaves through her family, her friends, and the entire Chicago community. A young mother, 4 months pregnant, gunned down while sitting in her sub. A crime that was swift, targeted, and calculated. But as days turned into weeks and weeks into months, one thing became painfully clear: justice was nowhere in sight. Her family, devastated by the loss, struggled to understand how something so violent could happen in front of her own home, with no answers to follow. Derricka's mother, heartbroken and angry, called for justice, urging anyone with information to come forward. She spoke about her daughter's dreams, her kindness, her devotion to her family. She spoke about her granddaughter, Derricka's 9-year-old daughter, who now had to grow up without her mother. And she spoke about the unborn child who never got the chance to take a first breath. The pain in her voice was undeniable. "If you know something, say something," she said. "Don't let my baby's case go cold. Don't let them get away with this." But as time passed, the frustration grew. No arrests, no updates, no major breakthroughs. The investigation felt stalled, and for many in the community, that was unacceptable. As more details emerged, questions about the handling of the case began to surface. Could more have been done? Was there evidence that had been overlooked? One of the biggest concerns was the lack of surveillance footage. The shooting took place in a residential area, yet there were no usable camera angles capturing the suspect. Were there no security cameras nearby? Did police check every possible angle? And if any footage did exist, why hadn't it led to an arrest? Then there was the issue of witnesses. This wasn't a deserted street. There were people inside the homes nearby. Someone had to have seen something, but no one had come forward with a detailed account of the shooter. Was it fear? A sense of distrust in the justice system? Or was someone deliberately keeping quiet? Do you believe fear is stopping witnesses from speaking up? Or is there something deeper at play? Community activists stepped in, calling for justice not just for Derricka, but for every family waiting for answers after losing a loved one to gun violence. Marches were held, candlelight vigils took place, and social media campaigns spread her name in hopes that someone would speak up. But the reality was harsh. Without an arrest, without new evidence, the case was inching closer to going cold. "We cannot allow these cases to be forgotten," one activist said. "Too many times we see families cry out for justice and nothing happens. We need people to speak up. We need answers." The pressure on law enforcement grew. Detectives insisted that the case remained open and that they were actively pursuing leads. But the lack of visible progress led to doubt. Was there a breakdown in communication between investigators and the community? Was the case receiving the attention it deserved? Or had it already been pushed aside, joining the long list of unsolved homicides in the city? Do you think police have done enough to solve Derricka's case? Or is there more that should have been done? Tell us what you think in the comments. As the investigation continued to stall, Chicago police took an extra step. They announced a $15,000 reward for any information that could lead to the arrest of the person or people responsible for Derricka Patrick's murder. The hope was that financial incentive would encourage someone to come forward, someone who may have been too scared to speak before. "We know that someone out there has information," a Chicago PD spokesperson said. "We are asking that they do the right thing and come forward. Any detail, no matter how small, could be the key to solving this case." Rewards like this have helped solve cases in the past, but they rely on one thing: people willing to talk. The problem in many communities is that witnesses often fear retaliation. Some worry about their safety. Others believe that even if they speak up, justice won't be served. Will the reward be enough to change that? Do you think the $15,000 reward will help solve this case? Or do people need more protection before they come forward? Derricka's 9-year-old daughter was left with only memories of her mother. The baby she had been carrying would never get to meet their family, and her loved ones were forced to live with the pain of knowing that the person who killed her was still out there, walking free. The silence was unbearable. The lack of answers only made it worse. "We're never going to stop fighting for her," a relative said. "She didn't deserve this. That baby didn't deserve this. Somebody out there knows something, and we won't stop until we find out who did this." But would the truth ever come to light? Would the shooter ever be brought to justice? Or would Derricka Patrick's name become another statistic in a city where too many cases go unsolved? What do you think happened to Derricka Patrick? Should her case have received more attention? And why do you think so many cases like this remain unsolved? Let us know in the comments. If you believe Derricka's story deserves more attention, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this video. Justice can only come when people refuse to stay silent. Let's keep her memory alive.